My husband didn't see me crying at his promotion party until his boss asked if I was all right. Then he turned around. The champagne tower sparkled under crystal chandeliers, and I stood next to it counting my breaths because my therapist said that's what you do when panic attacks start building like storm systems you can feel approaching but can't stop. 43 minutes I'd been standing in this exact spot at the Ritz-Carlton ballroom while Michael worked the room like he was campaigning for office, and not once had he glanced in my direction. My feet screamed in the heels his assistant picked out because my usual flats weren't appropriate for his big night. The dress was his choice too. Navy sheath his mother approved via FaceTime. Sophisticated enough to compliment him without drawing attention. That phrase kept echoing in my head, without drawing attention, like I was a piece of furniture meant to blend seamlessly into his carefully curated life. Someone approached asking about Michael's partnership plans and whether we'd be moving to that bigger house in Riverside, and I realized with a jolt that everyone at this party knew about a house my husband was planning to buy except me. When had he looked at houses? Had I been there? The memories felt slippery, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The tears started without warning, hot and mortifying, sliding down my cheeks while across the room Michael threw his head back laughing at something Richard Whitmore said. That laugh carried over the ambient party noise and hit me like a physical blow because I couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that with me, fully present and genuinely delighted instead of distracted by his phone or already thinking 3 steps ahead to his next professional move. I turned toward the champagne tower and pretended to study the glasses, using my hair as a curtain to hide my face, trying desperately to pull myself together because this was Michael's night and I was not going to be the wife who made a scene. Except I was already making a scene, wasn't I? Standing here crying at my husband's promotion party while he remained completely oblivious 20 feet away. A waiter passed with concerned eyes, and I shook my head slightly to indicate I was fine, and we both knew I was lying. The panic in my chest built higher, that feeling like the air was too thick to breathe properly, and I gripped the edge of the table hard enough that my knuckles went white. Then a woman appeared next to me, young, maybe late 20s, wearing a server's uniform with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, and something about the genuine concern in her voice made my throat tighten even more. I nodded automatically because that's what you do when strangers ask uncomfortable questions, but she didn't move away. Instead, she handed me a clean handkerchief from her pocket, and her brown eyes held something that looked almost like recognition, like she'd stood exactly where I was standing and understood in a way that didn't require explanation. "I've been watching you stand here alone for half an hour," she said, glancing briefly at Michael across the room, "and I don't think anyone else has noticed you're here at all, which seems really wrong at a party that's supposedly celebrating both of you." The words hit like she'd reached into my chest and squeezed my heart, articulating something I'd been feeling but couldn't name, and suddenly I was crying harder despite my desperate attempts to stop. "It's his night," I managed to say through the tears. "I'm just here to support him." The woman's expression shifted to something between sympathy and anger. "Supporting someone doesn't mean disappearing completely," she said, and those words lodged in my brain like a splinter I couldn't remove, painful and impossible to ignore. Before I could respond, Richard Whitmore's voice boomed through the sound system calling for attention, and the room gradually quieted as everyone turned toward the small stage at the front. Michael made his way through the crowd accepting congratulations, his face glowing with satisfaction, and climbed the steps to embrace Richard in that masculine half-hug before turning to face his audience. The woman next to me hadn't moved, and I realized she was watching this unfold with clinical observation. Michael launched into a speech he'd clearly been preparing for weeks, thanking the firm and mentioning specific partners who'd mentored him, talking about sacrifice and dedication and late nights and difficult cases. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. "I'm grateful for the strong foundation at home that allows me to focus completely on my work." The words sounded thoughtful and appreciative, but standing there with tears wet on my cheeks and a stranger's handkerchief clutched in my hand, all I could hear was the truth underneath. I'd become furniture in our house, present but unnoticed unless Michael needed something specific. The applause was thunderous when he finished his speech, raising his champagne glass in a toast. "To partnerships, both professional and personal," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd, but somehow never landing on me despite standing in direct line from the stage. "And to the people who make our success possible." More applause, more congratulations, and Michael descended into a swarm of people wanting to celebrate him. Richard Whitmore approached me then, his wife Helen beside him, both wearing polished smiles that faltered slightly when they got close enough to see my face. And what Helen said next would finally make Michael turn around and see what he'd been missing all along. Full story is linked below or on my channel.